Hey guys, welcome back to Jazz Anime Commentary. Today, I'm going to talk about the connection between Lady Eboshi from Princess Mononoke and Lieutenant Tsurumi from Golden Kamuy. Both stories deal with war, conflict, and the relationship between humans and nature, but that's not all they have in common. What really stands out is their antagonists. They're intelligent, ruthless, and unexpectedly affectionate. Both of them went through intense hardship and chose to live for other people. In this video, I'm going to dive deep into their goals, their personalities, and the outcomes they face. By the end of this video, you might actually feel like you want to watch both of these anime. First, let's take a look at the basic stories and the similarities in their goals. Princess Mononoke is set in medieval Japan. A young man named Ashitaka, who is searching for a way to break his curse, ends up in the Iron Town. The leader of the town is called Lady Eboshi, and her people produce iron and manufacture firearms. But iron production requires a huge amount of resources, like water and charcoal. She destroys the surrounding forests and comes into conflict with the gods of the mountains. As a result, she clashes with the sun, also known as Princess Mononoke, a girl raised by a wolf god. At first, Lady Eboshi sounds like a total villain, but she has another side. In the Iron Town, she actively takes in people who were rejected by society, like former prostitutes and people with leprosy, and gives them work so they can live with dignity. Using firearms, she's trying to build both wealth and power while creating a place for the marginalized. And ultimately, she's trying to take down the existing system of the country. That's what drives Lady Eboshi. So what about Lieutenant Tsurumi? Golden Kamuy takes place in the early 20th century, Hokkaido. A former soldier, Saiichi Sugimoto, hears about gold hidden by the indigenous Ainu people. He teams up with an Ainu girl named Asurba to find it, hoping to fulfill his late friend's wish. At the same time, Lieutenant Tsurumi leads a military unit, also pursuing the goal to fund a military coup. He's a survivor of the Russo-Japanese War, where he lost many comrades due to reckless orders from above. But the army blamed his division for those losses, and even after returning home, the survivors were treated poorly. He plans to build military factories, providing stable, long-term jobs for the families of wounded and fallen soldiers. Neither Lady Eboshi nor Lieutenant Tsurumi are driven only by personal gain. They fight on the front lines and take a hard stance against anyone who stands in the way of their ideals. They also share a ruthless side, willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. Lady Eboshi's firearms are extremely advanced for the time and highly lethal. The iron produced in her town is also used by samurai to make weapons, which fuels wars or robbery. There's no way she doesn't understand that. She runs her town knowing that it will create more conflict. There are also moments that show how cold her decisions can be. For example, when her group is attacked by wolf gods, she quickly decides to leave behind villagers who fall off a cliff. Instead of trying to save those who are unlikely to survive, she prioritizes protecting the people and supplies that can be brought back. And even in her battle against the boar gods, she carries out strategies that use some of her own people as bait. Well, Lieutenant Tsurumi is no different. He's planning to buy and manufacture weapons, which will lead to more wars. There are also scenes where he tries to fund his plan through opium production. Ethically, that's way out of line. Throughout Golden Kamuy, many of his men are killed or wounded in battles against enemy forces, but he never stops fighting. They're cold, they're ruthless, and yet so many people choose to follow them, because their leadership isn't built on only rules or rewards. It's built on human connection. For Lady Eboshi, one of the leprosy patients in her village says,
"She's the only one who saw us as human beings. We are lepers. The world hates and fears us, but she took us in and washed our rotting flesh and bandaged us."
That alone says everything about why they love her. The woman she rescued from prostitution also deeply respect her, and are willing to take up arms to protect her. It couldn't have been easy or cheap to redeem them. Eboshi shows how much she values them through her actions, not just her words. And what about Tsurumi? His inner circle is intensely devoted to him. Usami, for example, even turns Tsurumi's drawings on his face into permanent tattoos. And Koito, a young officer, literally screams with excitement whenever Tsurumi speaks to him. To gain complete trust from his subordinates, he occasionally stages dramatic rescue operation, binding them to him through emotion. His right-hand man, Sergeant Tsukishima, is one of them. Throughout his childhood, Tsukishima suffered from his father's abuse. The only person who truly understood him was his lover, but she went missing because of his father. In despair and anger, Tsukishima killed him and was sentenced to death, but Tsurumi intervened and orchestrated his release. Later, he says to Tsukishima,
"You were a fine soldier for my own homeland. Even more, you were a man I could trust. You were, above all, a comrade in arms."
That's why Tsukishima chose to devote himself to Tsurumi. Tsukishima says, only people like Lieutenant Tsurumi are capable of doing great things, even though he knows that not everything Tsurumi does is right. Most of the people who follow Eboshi and Tsurumi have been abandoned by society. They've been hurt and ignored, but these leaders see their pain, grief, and anger. Basically, they're incredibly attentive. They both put a lot of care and effort into their subordinates. That's why they inspire a kind of loyalty where people are willing to die for them. When you think of Muzan Kibutsuji from Demon Slayer, you can see how distinctive they are. Muzan is purely selfish, willing to sacrifice anyone just to survive. He often loses his temper and even abuses or kills his own subordinates out of anger. It's almost funny, and that's what makes him such a unique character. Demon Slayer is basically a straightforward good versus evil story, while Princess Mononoke and Golden Kamuy focus on justice from both protagonists' and antagonists' perspectives. In other words, the antagonist's principles shape how the entire story is formed. Well, we're getting off track. So, we've looked at the compassion and ruthlessness Eboshi and Tsurumi share. Now you might be wondering how their attitudes were shaped, right? The answer lies in their devastating past. Lady Eboshi's backstory isn't shown in the film, but according to official materials, she was once a prostitute. She was trafficked and later bought by a leader of the Wako, pirates who operated across Asia, and became his wife. Later, she killed him and returned to Japan with his weapons and treasure from China. When I learned this, it all clicked. That's why she basically doesn't trust men and build a society where women hold power. It's an absolutely brutal experience. There's also a scene where Ashitaka talks about his curse to the people of Irontown and tries to stop the conflict with the forest god. And Eboshi responds,
"I'm getting a little bored of this curse of yours, Ashitaka."
According to the director Hayao Miyazaki, she's actually furious in the scene. In the storyboard, there is a note saying, Eboshi has experienced deep hatred, curses, and suffering, so she cannot stand this. I kind of feel like, isn't it too unfair for Ashitaka to be cursed just for trying to protect his village from a raging god? But for Eboshi, Ashitaka's words might have sounded naive. And Lieutenant Tsurumi has lived a brutally hard life as well. He was born into a wealthy family, but they fell into ruin after a civil war, and he eventually joined the military as an adult. However, because his hometown had been on the losing side of the war, he was never accepted into the dominant factions. His path to advancement was blocked from the very beginning. Then he was sent to Russia as a spy, where he ran a photo studio and married a local woman. He had a daughter and loved his family deeply. But they were killed in a shootout, and he left Russia heartbroken. Throughout the story, he carries his daughter's little finger bone with him as a keepsake. Then came the Russo-Japanese War. He charged into enemy lines through a rain of blood and suffered a severe wound to his forehead. Both Eboshi and Tsurumi have seen a kind of hell on earth. They've been hurt over and over by things completely beyond their control. They could have chosen to give up, to pity themselves and stop moving forward. But instead, they stood up every time and carved out their own path. Now let's take a look at their final choices. In her all-out war against the forest spirits, Lady Eboshi cuts off his head. But the moment she does, the forest begins to collapse and the Iron Town is completely destroyed. She even loses her right arm, bitten off by the wolf god, and can no longer fire a gun again. However, when the head is returned to the forest spirit by the protagonists, nature begins to regenerate. New life starts to grow across the mountains. In the end, she says to the surviving villagers, "We're gonna start all over again. This time, we'll build a better town." It seems that Eboshi came to realize that destroying nature for short-term gain will never truly lead to success and can ultimately bring ruin to everything she's built. Meanwhile, Tsurumi's final battle takes place on top of a moving steam train. It's revealed that the gold he has been chasing is no longer just gold. It's been turned into the land deeds of Hokkaido. Still, he fights to obtain it. But in the middle of the battle, two things fall from the train at the same time: the deeds and his daughter's little finger bone. He's first to choose one, and without hesitation, he reaches for the deeds. But the train never stops. Tsurumi falls into the sea, and it seems like he's died. However, in the final chapter, it's hinted that he may have survived and continued working in the shadows to protect Japan from Russian expansion. Their endings may be different, but even in the most extreme situations, they continue to pursue their purpose, no matter the cost. They don't confuse their goals with the methods, and if something fails, they look for another way. They share this kind of resilience. Were they destroyers, consumed by hatred and resentment, bringing about new tragedies? Or were they something else, people who rose from their own suffering and reached out to those who had been left behind? I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.